everybody. Good to see you. Yeah, I know I'm a few hours late today, but I'm still here. We got this last week of summer here before the kiddos go back to school, and it's chaos. So, as is life, right? It's good to see you guys online. Hey, everyone. I'm also live on YouTube. Different angles, obviously, because I'm going to do a little demo today for those of you who are visual learners like myself. Today, what I want to talk about is something that I have been seeing a lot in myself, and obviously in all of the classrooms that we have going on right now. We have Superhuman Masterclass that is going on for the rest of this year, and what that is really about you getting deep within yourself and activating that superhuman potential within your physical body, the power of your emotions, the where your feelings are taking you to the subconscious programs that you're playing out, and really how to take your power back in a world that is designed to keep you a slave, obviously. And so I want to talk about the contradictions today. And I have been talking a lot about these last few weeks as far as the splits in our consciousness. Now, all the different fields have different names for this. You know, if you're looking in the field of psychiatry, you're going to find that the split in consciousness they refer to it as kind of parts. If it gets a little bit more fractured or separated, it can be called DID, which is identity dissociation disorder. But ultimately, we all have multiple personalities. Okay. And if you look at who we are as multidimensional beings, that's not a bad thing. And when they all work in unity, imagine a reality that you could create with all of those puzzle pieces. And you know that you are different parts of yourself because you want different things. Simultaneously, you could totally want to be in a relationship, but then part of you is like, I really like my freedom, or I really want to be a parent, but I kind of don't want to, take care of anybody else. And so we really want to focus on our contradictions, especially as we're going to be kind of moving into a ton of retrograde energy, which is going to throw you back into your trauma. That's what it's going to do if it isn't already doing that and you're not totally experiencing it. Because when you come here, you obviously came here for the virtual reality simulation of splitting yourself into a billion different pieces, kind of like what Source is doing. But then you're going to kind of pull yourself back into kind of one big desire, like your big why for being here. Notice that the things that you truly desire all work with each other. It's not like you have really extreme splits in your desire. If you want, a family and you want a business, then it somehow is going to work together if you are desiring from your heart. If you're desiring from your head, it might be coming from addiction. It might be coming from loss. It might be coming from other ways. But when you really kind of sit with your heart's desires, everything that you desire will line up with every area of your life if you're being authentic. But a lot of us are not being authentic, and we don't even realize it because we don't really understand how else to be, because, we're fractured, which means different aspects of you are functioning differently in different parts of your life. Like, who are you at work versus who are you at home, right? Who are you with money versus who are you when you have no money? Who are you when you want something you can't have, and who are you when you have something that you don't want? So you can see that you already can see the splits in your consciousness. And the way that my guides kind of presented it to me, because I'm such a visual learner, is they said, imagine that when you come into the third dimension, because this is where we create energy into form, that we're all going to start off like this delicate little teacup. This is some bone china here. I think I got it at the thrift store, so I'm not worried about smashing it up. But as it is, it has this little saucer, right? And it has a little teacup, and it could be worth something, okay? It has value. It has purpose. It's whole. It is a whole system that if you put tea in it, then you can have that experience. So this is kind of like what represents us when we come in here. And we come into the third dimension, and we have a family that we move into. And because we're holistic, we we really kind of radiate and shine in a big way when we first come in, and everybody's so excited about the light within us and, you know, the joy and the love that we bring. But as we start to get older and a little bit bigger, you know, maybe even toddler age, we start to kind of like rattle everyone's cages that maybe not so energetic, maybe other people that don't have so much vital energy. And what happens is your split begins here. How it works is your higher self, imagine that this is your higher self, and this is your soul that is embodied, which means your body, sitting there watching me in my body, represents this teacup. And this represents your higher self, okay? So the first thing that happens in our family unit is that we get separated from our spirit or our higher self. Now we're just a teacup, right? And again, still have value, still have purpose, still are a little holistic in nature, but now we're going to kind of need something to sit upon. We're going to need something to attach to feel whole. We're going to need mom. We're going to need dad. We're going to need the siblings. We're going to need attention. We're going to need, you know, we're going to need some sort of affinity to kind of latch onto, because now we're starting to disassociate. Now, if I can do this without making a mess. I don't have little kids, so I can smash away. So imagine that this is kind of your playpen. All right, so this is your inner child, and this is your playpen. And you are going to go through many different fractures in your family, in your social system, whether that be, you know, you were adopted, or you were raised by grandparents, or, you know, your parents got divorced, or you had a sibling that was born, or you started school. You know, most of our big fractures happen energetically and physically by the time we're 7. And the reason why we tend to stop from the root fractures at 7 is because the subconscious hardens, and that it kind of takes it on the shape of a hard drive. Now, that doesn't mean that you cannot be refractured, which means that if you have root trauma, which we all do because we're human, we all had a childhood, we all have root trauma, then you're going to disassociate from that to basically figure out how to survive with that trauma. And I'll explain a little bit as we go. And this starts to get smashed up, the more intense your shine is, the more authentic you are, because it's going to rub up against other people that are fractured, which means everyone in your family is already fractured. Now, once you're fractured, if you've ever had like a raging headache, or you've been sick and someone walks in the room and they're just pure sunshine, you're like, right? You kind of like want them to get away with their big energy, and you may not even be understanding that that might be rubbing you the wrong way or triggering you because you're fractured. And when you become fractured, if you understand kind of split personalities, and that when one part of you is being active, the other part of you is unaware that it isn't being active, which means like who you are when you have a lot of money and you're like, drinks for everyone, you know, and you get paid, and then all of a sudden next week it's like you ran out of money and you're like, why did I do that? Right? That was 2 different people having 2 different experiences, one with money, one without money, and you're split. So let me see if I can break this with my Wu-Tang towel, of course. And try not to create too many shatters. I got my hammer. Talk about like anger therapy. Now I'm going to keep everything in this hand as a second demonstration. And I know you guys on YouTube can't maybe see this as well because this screen is so much smaller, but I'm going to smash this teacup. Okay. Okay, let's see what it looks like. That was basically like 3 shatters. Okay. That's good enough for our demo. All right, now it's worthless, okay, unless you do the Japanese art with it and you put everything back together with gold. And that's what makes you an alchemist. That's what we're going to do, all right? So now you are a teacup that has shattered, right? Now you might have some big pieces, and this is the part that doesn't necessarily get shattered, and this could be your strong sense of academia, or your athletic nature, or your ability to caretake, okay? And this piece might be that, you know, you're good at being tidy or something. You look at the big pieces as like natural efforts, things that you don't really have to try to do, that you're just naturally good at. Okay. For me, it was like I hid my imagination so nobody smashed it too hard because I didn't share too much of it. And then you've got some other big pieces, and then you've got these small shatters. Okay. And these are the ones that are creating all of the chaos in your reality right now, because you are completely unaware of them. But when you are focused as them, because you're going to take turns with your consciousness, right? Part of your consciousness is going to be over here. Let's say you're a great athlete, okay? And you are winning all these things, but now you're the golden child. And so the expectations of who you are is really burning you out. And when this piece gets burned out, the light of consciousness is going to maybe go shine into this part of you that feels absolutely worthless and doesn't even want to live, all right? Or feels like it's only loved because it's good at something, or it's only as good as its last performance or sales, okay? And so when your consciousness gets focused into the little shreds, this is when you feel your unworthiness, right? Because think about it. This has become devalued. You're going to see yourself through this. You're going to feel worth less than when you are focused here. So what we try to do is, and this is survival based, because we find things that are acceptable in our families and we kind of latch on to the persona of that in order to survive the childhood. While we kind of shadow these parts. These are the parts that, are angry and lost and separated and numb. These could be the parts that are addicted to something that makes them feel connected, because these pieces are going to represent your disconnection. Okay. And I've also got like tons of little shards here that don't even look like china anymore. They look like salt, right? Little pebbles. They don't even look like anything. And so those are also still vibrating your consciousness. Now, everything in the universe that is in a living perspective of consciousness always vibrates with the law of three. Always. There always has to be three parts, which means that this has three parts, this has three parts, this has three parts. And the way that I look at it is the me, myself, and I, or the child, the mother, father energy, because this still has masculine, feminine energy, and it still has that spark of the inner child, regardless if it's broken or not. But what happens is the more that these pieces disassociate or have to hide, because these are the parts that you don't want anyone to see. These are the parts that get triggered after 3 months in a relationship. These are the parts that you want to hide. These are things about your past that you can't cover up. This is abuse from your childhood. This is secrets that you've had to keep. And so you're going to try to lead with these bigger pieces, but after a while, you're going to feel unfulfilled. You're going to feel unsatisfied. These pieces are going to have natural hunger attached to them because they are never part of anything. They feel different. They feel left out, and yet they are still you. And what they do is they form almost a false mother-father aspect. And in psychotherapy, Dr. Richard Schwartz, he calls this parts. And he refers to them as there are no bad parts, because whether this is star of the football team or the secret crackhead, right? They're all from this unity consciousness that was separated in childhood and is trying to find its way back together through basically bad behavior or a call for love, right? And he refers to the elements of the law of three. These are considered exiles, and they have a firefighter and a manager attached to them. And the manager is there to keep this hidden from you. Because if you know about it, right, then you're going to either try to bring it to the forefront and shine again and get reshattered. So even though it's kind of this is going to be your inner critic, you're going to have, kind of that warden aspect of you can't show anybody who you are, because if anybody saw this, they would run away. And so there's almost like a critic for every shard. And this is where it gets really layered in our multidimensional consciousness. And so each part also has what he refers to as a firefighter. what I refer to these as the warden and the medic, okay? And the medic is designed for when this shard starts to try to integrate into the whole or try to be seen and heard publicly in some way because it got triggered. The firefighter in his aspect is one who is about trying to put out the flame. So this is when you're going to start craving sugar. This is when you're like, I just need a drink. This is when you're like, I'm going to just doom scroll. This is when you're like, I need to go on a diet. So that kind of 911 energy kicks in and you start to binge eat or you watch porn or whatever you do. And then of course you do too much of that. The warden is going to show up and then start shaming you because now you're going to make everybody look bad. And this is happening with all of us all the time. So the more you would consider yourself spiritual, okay, this can be another form of disassociation because I've been in the spiritual community for a really long time and they don't even talk about this. They talk as all of this is the ego and, this is the only thing that is important. So in our work this year, we are going into a lot of opportunity to remagnetize all these pieces back together. Now, as long as this is all shattered like this, it has its maintenance system, it has its inner critic, it's got its medic to medicate it if it starts to get too sharp and out there, if it starts to get too triggered in your reality, if it starts to take too much of the light away, if the professional athlete starts to, wander into, drugs or something, then this has self-preservation built into it. Because when we look at acceptance in our society, to not be accepted is like death. Like to these little parts, it is death. And so even though you're like, oh, I kind of like being alone, you also have a lot of wounding around not being accepted and being rejected and abandoned. So these pieces are all playing out rejection and abandonment wounds in the shadow aspect of you. And these are like trying to live in the light, right? Outperform last month, be super dad, be super mom. And I know this is a very big burden to carry, because without the holistic nature of us, we are going to burn out. So now this is interesting because this becomes like the playpen, because these are all kind of like the broken inner child. And your shadow consciousness is never going to let you get bigger than your playpen. So if you notice, I don't care how much money you have, I don't care how successful you are, I don't know how good looking you think you are. What you're going to do is you're going to have the experience that your life is expanding and it never actually gets bigger than your playpen. Because without your higher self, okay, you're going to expand, contract, but you will never truly create a life that is bigger than your root fundamental wounding, which means that some of us are having the emotional attacks. We're still not being seen and heard. We're still not being loved. We're still putting a lot into things and we're not getting a lot back. We're giving, we're not receiving, right? We feel different in our own families. We feel separate from our families. And you can have millions of dollars and still feel this way. So what I want us to look at is our living contradictions, because if you can look at your contradictions, how on one side of the spectrum, you want to live this expanded life and adventure and find your soulmate and, just travel the world. And on the other side, it's like you've been so hurt by people that you're untrusting and, that ends up sabotaging the efforts, or you can't find anybody, or you get yourself so stuck in work or debt or something that you never can leave. And so that's the contradiction. The contradiction that I found with myself, because, I don't care, I'm raw here, is that I was living this life of kind of perpetual like hope and disappointment. So I would get like all excited about new relationships or new this or new that, and then it would be like this disappointment. And I've worked on a lot of that part, And so that part feels good. But then in other areas of maybe like my career or, being split as a mom, some of you guys out there that are like single parents, it's like, I want to do my job, but I also want to be a parent. And, I also want to be a friend, and I want to be a friend to myself. So we can feel really split. So the less shadow work that you have done around this, the more you're probably noticing that you get something and you lose something. You get something, you lose something, or you're constantly having to give up something, or you're kind of like getting triggered over things like, why is that triggering me? Or you're getting so triggered that you're starting to hide other pieces of you. Because eventually this is going to turn into the 80-year-old hooked up to oxygen watching TV if it is never recognized. Because your life force energy cannot be maintained by ego consciousness, which is basically ego consciousness is directing and reflecting your life, even though ego consciousness in the bigger parts of you can appear and play the role of higher self. Okay, now who's higher self? All right, higher self is, and again, like the way that the psychotherapy, they call it like the 8 C's. But see, what I do is I call it the 13 C's that make up Christ consciousness. Okay, so it's things like this has a personality that is much different than this. All right, this is going to be calm. This is going to be considerate. This is going to be confidence without arrogance. This is going to be clarity, connectedness, cleverness, creativity. It's going to be in a constant state of non-judgment. So this has no judgment for anything that's going on with this, especially because this is this. Okay, and isn't it interesting that y'all waiting for the spaceships, right? The saucers to come save you. Hello, it's you that you're here to save. So what we're doing, at least in my academy, is we're working with this energy, because I can spend my whole life managing this, putting out fires, trying to learn about my shadows and, try to clean up all of my trauma. But if I clean up all of my trauma without this, I'm still not whole, and I'm going to need someone to validate me. I'm going to need something to sustain me, because when I have this, I am self-sustainable. This is the sovereign energy. This is why we are in this kind of Aquarian energy now of the Christ consciousness. So this is actually what makes the Christ consciousness be able to help bring all of this together. So this becomes like the loving parent that you've never had. This becomes that calm life coach that's whispering in your ear instead of the ego yelling at you to hurry up and lose 10 pounds because you're getting old and ugly, right? So your higher self would never speak to you this way. Now, spending hours in meditation will not bring this in. The way that we are going to practice this is by letting go of judgment for all of this. Okay, and so when you can let go of the judgment for these parts and begin to build a relationship with this, right? You learn how to talk to yourself in a loving, kind, considerate, compassionate, confident way where you understand. Because one thing about your higher self is that your higher self may not have been able to be with you in the childhood because it was kind of pushed away and the vibration was very different, but it's always been here. And so it's seen everything you've gone through. It has witnessed every tragedy. It has been sending you signals. And another reference that we can make with this is you're the avatar in the video game, and I'm the higher self that's holding the joystick, and I have lost connection with you. And when you regain that connection, well, then the whole game starts to change. Your vibration increases, not from a doing place, like I'm doing everything, I'm working out at the gym, I'm making a bunch of money, to your state of being. You start to become holistic in nature, and therefore you feel self-fulfilled, you feel self-driven, you feel inspired, but not by what someone else is doing. All the 7 deadly sins go away. You stop being gluttonous, you stop being envious, because when you reconnect with this part of you, then you are naturally, your obsession is to bring this back into wholeness, and yet it doesn't seem egoic. It's not like, oh, I'm working on my parts, because your higher self has this way of literally being considerate to everyone. Because as your higher self starts to kind of merge in and pick up these pieces and start magnetizing everything back together, you start to recognize like fractures in other people around you, and you start to have compassion. So, I mean, I know as a woman, especially with children, it's like, you get out there in the dating world and it's like, you don't know who this person is. And you're not going to really know who this person is until you're in uncomfortable situations, right? It's like somebody who's taking you on dates and all these things, wonderful. But who are they when they don't get their way? Who are they in traffic? Who are they if they had a money struggle or their identity was stolen? Who are they with their mother, behind closed doors? Like who are their pieces? And these pieces don't usually start to project into a relationship until you're in that more comfort zone. And so, when you get to my age, and it's like, unless you've known the person for 30 years, it's going to be very difficult for you to know anyone, except when you start to know yourself, right? Then you know everyone. Because the one thing about your higher self, it is connected to every other higher self. And so all of a sudden, and what I've noticed, because this has been my main focus this year, is that I have compassion for what I'm experiencing with my parts, and I'm learning how to love all the parts, especially the ones that have been, like that are just little tiny pieces, okay? And that you've never wanted anyone to see, or you didn't even know that they still exist, but something felt like it was missing. Now, the thing about these littler pieces that are not really talked about that much is this is where a lot of your life force energy and vitality is. Because think about it. What are you going to be shamed for the most in childhood? Are you going to be shamed for, following rules? No. You're going to be shamed for, doing exactly what everybody tells you to do? No. This is going to be kind of your authentic outlaw nature. This is going to be your vitality. This is going to be your authentic speech. This is going to be your creativity that, nobody can contain or control. And so as these pieces of you get lost, well, so does that creativity. Maybe those psychic abilities get lost because, you were talking to a spirit at 2 years old and somebody was like, hit you with a hammer. And then this went into the shadow. And so now you're like calling a psychic, and because you don't think you have this ability. And trust me, you are a whole set. You have everything in your container. And when you are kind of put back together, and of course I just like pulled a little gold marker out. This is kind of like that Japanese art that is so expensive. And it's like everything gets put back together with gold. And now it is worth more. So we want to see ourselves as this kind of thing, because as the higher self comes back together, it's going to make its entire purpose to bring all of you back together. And all of me is alchemy. And as the gold digger, right, we are the alchemists, where we're like digging in the fertilizer, the shit that's going on in your life, for those little pieces of gold. Getting the big gold nuggets is awesome and stuff, but even, the little piece is important. And this is kind of what we're doing here. If you guys want to know, like, what this virtual reality is, like, what is my purpose? Everyone comes here and gets shattered. But there are two different ways you could go about this, okay? Now, I've taught in my classrooms that there are two different ascensions going on, right? And you get to play the good guy or the bad guy here. And all's fair in love and war, so behind closed doors, maybe that was your purpose, to play the naughty side. But if you look at scripture and you look at fundamentally what triggers people the most on planet Earth is kind of malice and cruelty towards children, right? And so this is kind of like represented the inner child here. So let's look at the two different ascensions. We got the ascension of Christ consciousness, which is the holistic becoming of you. And obviously this would make you quite magical and quite superhuman, because very few people on the planet are a full set. Okay, and so obviously you're going to be quite extraordinary if you have this full set, or at least 51% of this put back together. You're going to be able to glory God, because God can pour that life force energy into the cup. If you have no cup, then it's more of like the spaghetti strainer, right? Where you're just like, you pray and then you feel like crap in 10 minutes because it's all just like bleeding out of you. Or you say your scriptures and you feel better, and then you just 10 minutes later, you're just like, being rude to yourself again. I had the strainer somewhere. I think my son took it for a hat. I don't know where it is. But anyways, this is kind of like what we're going back to. This would be the superhuman. Now, this doesn't mean it wasn't broken. You're here to be the mosaic. You are here to put yourself back together with unconditional love for every part of you. Every part of you. And the shards and the little ones lost in the shadows that are going to get really triggered by things that you believe you have nothing in common with, those are going to be the little shards. And as soon as you kind of go into that awakening and you start to work towards self-compassion and self-love, this process begins organically. Now, we would call this like an initiation. Like this is like an initiation back into your wholeness. But there is a second initiation. And this is what happens when you start doom scrolling, because you're going to see this second initiation happening. The second initiation that's happening on planet Earth is to basically remove this from ever existing and to continue to shatter this to the point of no return. So if this was completely shattered beyond oblivion, then there might be pieces that are within your consciousness that can get so distorted and so disassociated from ever knowing that it was God itself, that it goes into an inversion cycle and it begins to hate the child. Hate. So if you look at trauma, there's three ways that trauma is expressed. Number one, you can become the trauma. So if you were highly abused and the only way that you were able to stay safe is to be the abuser, kind of like the bully was bullied, that's one opportunity. The second opportunity is you can fall into the victim, where it's kind of like now you're just like everything is victimizing you. Every ounce of the memory of that trauma, you're just falling into that victim state. Or you could go into what we would call like the hero state. And I will feel like that's probably what I did with my trauma the first few years was I'll save everybody who has this same trauma. And, there my career was born. So when you're playing a hero, it can very quickly turn into the martyr because you're trying to save people from what you are traumatized about. And so it's almost like you can feel their trauma so much more because it's also yours. But by us playing the hero role, the rescuer, the savior, the constant caretaker, then we continue to refracture the part of us that really needs us to fulfill our healing journey. And this is another way that we can kind of get distorted and addicted to the spiritual world, right? And I see this happen so much with really good coaches. I'm like, you guys are online 24 hours a day, and I can feel like your passion for waking people up, but is that coming from your own pain of these pieces not being awake within you? And so, again, there's no judgment. It's just like we all have to work on our container and allow us to have compassion for everyone else who's working their way back. Because what can happen very easily in this dynamic of third dimension is the more shattered you get and the more shattered you get, the more you lose your humanity. And you move into this kind of, when this is too far gone, you move back into the primal nature, right? Kill or be killed. It's all about consuming. It's all about what you have. It's all about, get, or take. And again, I wouldn't say anybody that follows me or anything is in that category, but it can happen pretty easily if a child is super fractured very early and never has resources or anyone in their life that acts like that flashlight in the dark. Because then what's going to happen is the darker pieces that are out there are going to magnetize towards them. And then they're going to bring them into that initiation to further fracture themselves completely. And then that's how a human could do horrible things to a child. Or if you've studied like the serial killer brain or the pedophile brain, like this is what happens is their trauma is so distorted that they lose all connection with any sort of omnipresent power within them. And so in order to survive, their inner child is so destroyed that they become the destroyer of the inner child. So if you look at scripture, there's like over 100 scriptures about the inner child. So obviously Christ consciousness is about resurrecting that inner child and living as the child of God. But on the flip side, right, we have the, destroy the child. And that's where all of those icky things come in that we kind of like, especially if you're a parent or if that's happened to you, it can really trigger parts of you. So the reason why I want to share this today is because we're moving into like this retrograde energy that's going to start shoving you back into your pieces or your parts. Okay. And you're going to be like, what the heck? It's going to feel like you don't have your footing. It's going to feel like 10 steps forward, 10 steps back. It's going to feel like explosions of triggers happening. But it's almost like, I like it, what Dr. Schwartz says, is he says that whoever is like torturing you is your tour mentor. So it's your mentor that's going to help you tour back to your pieces. And so that's really what we're doing in the classroom the rest of this year, is we are working on building our relationship with our higher self and really knowing the difference between the higher self and the ego that wants to be higher self. That's kind of like I'm better than you and I'm more awake than you and I'm more spiritual than you. That's not really your higher self, because your higher self truly loves everyone all the time. And it sees people that are fractured in a compassionate way, which means if you saw someone doing something really icky, but you were in the vibration of your higher self, you would see that was just one part of them that was acting in that behavior. And you would also be able to see the goodness within them. Because I know that that's been one thing, like growing up, I might have done some bad things because, I was trying to get love or whatever, or be seen and heard. But there was other parts of me that were awesome that didn't get noticed. And so when we kind of get thrown into, you're all your past, or you did this one thing, or especially for me being a teacher, it's like you're expected to like have no trauma and be perfect. And that just isn't the case, because this is just my ability to be a teacher and a channel is just because that piece of me somehow didn't get fractured. And I was able to kind of like really perfect that particular craft and put a lot of energy into it. But it doesn't mean that I don't have other pieces of the childhood that I'm working to repair. And those are the pieces that are going to get triggered in relationships and with money and like with getting older and, with your kids and, just like your past keep coming up, or fear of the future. So what I thought it would be fun for us to do for this Monday mindset is to kind of look at where is my contradiction, right? Not your contribution. You know where your contribution is. Where's your contradiction? Like, where are you literally like so polarized that you can't manifest? Okay, so it's like one part of me is like, I really want, this relationship, or I really want this job, but part of me is like, I don't want to work. Okay. Or I really want to, get my psychic abilities downloaded, but I'm really afraid of like dark energy coming in me. So if you can just be honest about your contradiction and look at it from a neutral observer, that is your first step of introducing your higher self in. Because if I could look at both parts of me, right, the negative and the positive, the part that is so polarized that I'm literally not a magnet to my desires, well, that's the first place that I can begin to heal. A lot of the times you want something so much that you're not even looking at the parts of you that are terrified, afraid, or have a pattern of disbelief or undeserving somewhere. So let's say you have a little tiny shard that says like, I'm worthless. Okay. One shard vibrates the same level of energy, consciousness, and magnetism as the biggest piece of you, because Spirit sees all of you at the same portion, same level. It is the same vibration. And I will tell you that getting cut by one of those little shards is probably going to get hurt. It's probably going to hurt worse than getting cut by the bigger piece. Like if you've had a dull knife and then you've had a paper cut, which one hurts? So the shards are vibrating at the same level of the greatness that you're showing the world, but you're unaware of it because you're not giving it a lot of energy. You know, you're kind of resistant of it. You've repressed it. You've disassociated from it. You're in denial of it, but it is not in denial of you as a holistic being. And the universe is going to take all your parts and it's going to create an algorithm of your greatest amount of love and your greatest amount of fear and your greatest amount of drive and your greatest amount of resistance. And it's going to create an algorithm, and that's going to produce your physical reality. It's designed to create mirrored consciousness so you can find your way back to those pieces. Because if you've ever wondered, how is it that my most intimate relationships know what buttons to push with me? Like, how is it that they know where these parts are when I've never shown anyone? How does this partner that I love just say something in a tone of voice that totally takes me back to my childhood or something? And now it's like I feel exposed and vulnerable and terrified. How is that possible? And the reason why is because you are a mirrored consciousness. So who you present yourself to the world with isn't what the world feels when they see you. Because they may see you have it together, but they're feeling all of you. And the parts of them that are in exile or in the shadow are also wanting to be seen and heard. And so they will kind of, those like, will project from the shadow, and then, you know, their dark part and your dark part is going to trigger each other. And Spirit's like, yay, now we can all fall in love because now you can see it. So the trigger is actually to create visibility for these parts of us that we've disassociated. So what I have my community doing, what my classroom is working on, is we're looking at the trigger as the opportunity, kind of like the upset creates the ability to reset. And, you know, the tormentor becomes our tormentor. And so if we look at these triggers as this is where I can truly put myself back together, this is an essential piece of myself, then it doesn't feel like, you know, you're studying content and you're chasing all these teachers around and you're learning all these different modalities. Because I'll tell you, after 13 years of doing this professionally, you can get very lost and have a great time disassociating, right? I could take my big piece and I could go teach it 15 no modalities and I could go help the world. And I might be at home going, why am I still unhappy? You know, why do I feel like I can't heal myself and yet I can heal everybody else? Or how come I know what other people need, but I don't know what I need? So our best investment for the rest of, you know, this year as we're working with this retrograde energy is to use our physical reality in the now moment. You don't have to go to your childhood to find these pieces. Everything's vibrating now. And what I'm doing this week in our Superhuman Masterclass is I'm teaching people how to time travel through the present moment to integrate their past into their future self. So your future self is the one who is giving you the desires, all right? Giving you the desires, those big, hairy desires that you're like, how would I ever manifest? That's coming from your higher self, because that's where he or she is vibrating. That's where they are holding space, awaiting the integration of you. So that is the you that is whole. So they're going to give you thoughts, feelings, signals, signs, desires, dreams to kind of bring you into these big desires. And then they're going to say, and how you're going to be able to manifest this is by being whole. So it kind of looks like, I got to go back to go forward. So it's really like the arrow experience. So you get the dream, but you're like, okay, this is who I am, but this is where I am. And that gap feels really far away from each other. How am I going to get there? Especially if I don't want to work or I don't want to do this. And so then you start to feel defeated and unworthy. And instead, this was part of your treasure map indicator that is done through sensation and feeling to now radiate those parts of you that are coming up. So it's like if you have a big dream, like retire, live on the beach, have a beach house, but then part of you is like, how would I do that? Right? There is a piece of you in the past, a little fracture or a piece of a fracture that actually has the ability, the talent, or the reference to be able to magnetize that you lost in childhood. So it is the resurrection of the inner child, which they call the second coming or the second childhood, which is the resurrection of the Christ consciousness, which is the holistic self in unity that is able to have instant manifestation. And in that way, that is like, okay, now this is the energy that you're going to use to get triggered and inspired to go find yourself and put yourself all back together. So I have put together a class called 5D Time Travel. And what we're going to be doing is we're going to be using the now moment to use our toolbox that's full of psychotherapy, quantum healing. We're going to be doing timeline jumping, and we're going to be doing all kinds of sensation body work because everything is about the embodiment. The only way you're going to find those pieces is through the embodiment piece where you actually magnetize yourself to it. And we're going to be using a lot of the body, mind, soul unity to find these pieces and integrate them back in quickly. So you don't have to wait for the trigger. Because if you don't do any inner child work or any, integration work, then you're going to be living in a constant state of trigger. So you're going to step on the glass to find the piece. Instead of like sit down and drop into your body and feel the sensation of the trigger and let that trigger manifest, magnetize you to a memory. And that memory is the memory that we will use through the activation of the body, kind of like using the body as the portal to teleport into that moment where then compassionate communication and basically awareness of that piece, acceptance of that piece, and it's all about kind of like validating that piece, letting that piece know it's valid, loving it unconditionally. It will naturally, organically move back into the whole, and now it is not this lost soul piece of you that's fragmented. So it's almost like all we have to do is walk forward motion in our now moment, and when we step on glass, we can time travel. Or we can take 5 minutes in the morning, 5 minutes at night, and call these pieces back through body sensations. So it's like when you sit and say, I'm really triggered about what this person says. Where do I feel that in my body? We're going to feel that somewhere, and then we're going to use that to take us back to a particular thought, memory, or feeling, emotion, belief, and that's going to bring us right into the subconscious, because the subconscious does not work in your thoughts, guys. The subconscious is the sensation, feeling, picture state. So a feeling is going to have a picture, kind of like a reel of a movie. Like you think that you're watching a movie, but you're actually watching pictures going really, really fast. And this is exactly how your subconscious mind is working. So we can go back to the fragmented scene where that trigger of someone just, stealing your identity happens right now. This is not actually the trauma. This is the refracture, so we can read the pain, and so we can use that old military model to feel the pain, to heal the pain. We'll go back in, we'll pull that piece back in, and we'll notice that the thing you'll notice the fastest about this process, which is so cool, is that you start to feel more vital energy in your body. You start to just have more energy, because think about your little kids that are just running, they have no off switch, like, oh, could I have some of that? You can get some of that, and it's in you. Okay, so you can pull that back in. You'll have so much more understanding of yourself, and a lot more compassionate, and just more consideration for yourself. Also, because you're doing this inner work, you're going to start to notice that people are going to treat you differently, which means they're going to be more compassionate and considerate to you, because you're not abandoning and rejecting yourself. They will stop abandoning and rejecting you. And when you find enough of these pieces, if you're that person who doesn't know what their purpose is, you're going to know what your purpose is. If you're one of those people who believe that they do not have these abilities, you're going to have these abilities. There will be no study, there will be no work, there will be no effort besides, right? Your reconnaissance mission of your Christ consciousness, your holistic nature. And so it sounds easy, and the way that I always teach is kind of that fourth grade understanding, because I don't care how grown up you think you are very much that frozen, traumatized child in aspects or parts of you that maybe struggle to understand this stuff. And so the way we've done it is we have found the way to integrate the past, present, and future by just being in the body and working with sensation pictures, your own first name, and then we'll get a lot of this fragmented done this year. Next year, we're going to start working on that lineage and that generational trauma that is kind of affecting like your whole bloodline, but you'll have so much more like those pieces. If you feel like you're here to end your generational trauma, well, you will have no problem doing that if you are 51% of yourself. Because I don't think nobody's walking around here as a full teacup unless your name is Jesus or Buddha, right? You know, so, and Buddha, he kind of stopped with one C. He's like, I'm compassion, the Buddha way. So even if you can just have compassion for these parts of yourself that are doing their best to exist without higher self, then you can understand your addictions. You can understand your cravings, your secret thoughts. And instead of judging yourself and pushing yourself more away and trying to highlight the spiritual parts of you, you will literally just find yourself back into the shadows, because it's almost like with alchemy, no man is left behind if you're going to enter the higher dimensional states. Because if there are fragmented parts of you that are unconsciously in negative vibrations, then that is where all of you has to stay through the algorithm, which means that your life will never get bigger than your smallest part. So whether you go the psychiatric route or you go the quantum way, right? We still have room in our classroom, and running a 50% off because we're already halfway through the year, but you would be able to kind of get the whole class, the whole year in the archive if you wanted to kind of go back. But we are just getting ready to start our quantum time travel in class this week. You can go to my link in the bio and you can register there. It's the Masterclass, Becoming Superhuman. Also, if you're interested in learning how to channel and know and speak through your higher self and work with other higher level beings in consciousness, then we have that class that's going on, and that's a group session, so it's super affordable and easy. And otherwise, we still have the Alchemy of Play, which is kind of hosted by me and channeled by Saint Germain and Lady Nada and Buddha, who are going to give you kind of a happily ever after explanation, tools, and adventure for you to truly understand your purpose and how you're working with all your parts, find your yellow brick road, or work with your, scarecrow and your Tin Man, and really just learn how to play I Spy and hide and seek with your inner child to resurrect the power. So the disempowerment, the disassociation, the hopelessness that you feel is coming from these lost parts. And so they will not ever get better with leaving them where they are, and you will never get bigger or more holistic without them. So I hope you had some sort of understanding in this today to try to explain this in a way that everybody can grasp. I know it can be completely, if it's not your thing, you probably stopped watching a long time ago. And those of you guys who joined me, I really appreciate you supporting my Monday Mindsets. And if you haven't followed, subscribed, liked on the YouTube channel, that does help. That gets our algorithm up so other people can see what we're doing. If this resonated with you, please share, get the word out there, and let's all go find our parts and become the holistic, superhuman, supernatural, godly version of ourselves. All right, guys, thanks so much for joining, and I will see you in the classrooms, which we have Wednesdays, and we have Friday, we have our channeling class. Besides that, I also offer private sessions. I do private mentorships. I do all sorts of regression processes and, everything. And if you're wanting to do more of a one-on-one thing, just look up what I've got available on my app there, and invest in your holistic nature, as you will see that these retrogrades are business. Okay. They're going to put you right back to where you need to be. And if you are resisting or rejecting that, it's going to be quite a painful next 4 to 5 months for you. Okay, so I will see you guys later. Thanks so much. And end.